So you want to own a car dealership in America. 16,990 of them sit on the arterial roads tonight. The flags, the balloon on an antenna, the glass wall, the rows of new metal, the small office beside the showroom floor where the paperwork gets signed. That is the picture. The filing says something else. In 2025, AutoNation's accounts put finance and insurance at $2,769 of gross profit per vehicle retailed, and the new vehicle itself at $2,564. Same customer, same afternoon. What the average store cleared that year is in no public document. Start with the money that walks through the door. The average franchise dealership in the United States moved $76.603 million of sales in 2025. That is a serious number for a business with one address and one parking lot, and almost all of it arrives attached to something with wheels. Nationally, service and parts accounted for 13.3% of dealership sales dollars that year. $1 in 8, and that count folds the finance office back into the vehicle departments. So if anything, it is counting generously in favor of the metal. AutoNation reports the finance desk on a line of its own. On that basis, parts and service brought in 17.5% of the company's revenue in 2025. Call it $1 in 6. Here is the part that does not fit. That department produced $2,355.1 million of gross profit in 2025. The new vehicle department, the one with the flags outside it, produced $664.8 million in 2025. Not a close thing, not a rounding difference. The small department out-earned the big one by more than 3-to-1. Here is the problem with checking any of this. Of those 16,990 stores, only a small number sit inside a company that has to open its books to a regulator. AutoNation is one. It holds 245 of them, and it reported $27,631.4 million of revenue for 2025. Every figure on that side of the argument comes out of a document a securities lawyer put his name to. The rest do not file anything. The industry's own annual financial profile prints their sales, their payroll, their repair orders, and their posted labor rates. It prints no profit line for them at all, which leaves one number sitting out of reach until the end of this. What a single retail delivery actually leaves behind after every department and every interest payment before tax. So what actually changes hands? Not the building, necessarily. Plenty of dealers lease the ground they stand on, not the cars either. What changes hands is a piece of paper with a manufacturer's name at the top of it. AutoNation ran 323 new vehicle franchises out of 245 stores at the end of 2025. Some buildings carry 2 or 3 marks under one roof. On the balance sheet in 2025, $1.0 billion of those rights sits recorded across 76 of the stores, and it sits there with no expiry date against it. Accountants only do that when the thing genuinely does not run out. It does not run out because state dealership franchise laws make it unlawful for a manufacturer to end a franchise or refuse to renew one without good cause. Read that the way a lawyer reads it. A manufacturer that wakes up one morning preferring to sell direct cannot simply take your store back. So what changes hands in a dealership sale is not a car lot with cars on it. It is that permission, and the manufacturer stands on the other side of it the whole time, setting your sales targets, your showroom fittings, your signage, how many units you hold on the ground, how much you spend telling people you exist. None of that is negotiable in the ordinary sense. It arrives as a standards package. This fascia, this floor tile, this many demonstrators kept on the ground, this score on the survey the manufacturer posts to your customer after every visit. Fall short of it for long enough, and the law that protects you starts to look thinner, because a store that keeps missing its targets is giving the manufacturer the good cause it would otherwise need to find. AutoNation employed roughly 24,800 people across that estate at the end of 2025, and a great many of them are there to keep those standards met. The permission is worth holding because of what runs through it. An average store retailed 955 new vehicles in 2025 at $48,205 apiece. It also retailed used ones at $30,736 apiece, and it did not have to go hunting for most of those. 45.4% of the used vehicles franchise dealers sold in 2025 came in as trade-ins on the new deals. Every new car you hand over hands you a used car to sell after it. The front of the shop feeds itself, and the trade-in arrives at a number you set on an afternoon when the customer is thinking about the car in the window and not about the one in the lot behind him. Then there is the third thing in the envelope, and nobody puts it on the sign. The permission seats you between the buyer and the manufacturer's own bank. Captive finance companies the lenders each brand owns wrote 57.9% of new vehicle financing in the fourth quarter of 2025. Banks took 24.9% and credit unions 9.5%. You are the desk all of it goes through, whoever ends up holding the paper. At AutoNation, finance and insurance produced 29.6% of gross profit in 2025 on 5.3% of revenue. Here is the part that surprises almost everyone about the owner list. In 2025, 90.5% of dealership owners ran between 1 and 5 stores. In 2018, the figure was 93.9%. That is a count of owners and not of stores, and the biggest groups hold far more rooftops than their slice of the owner list suggests. But the direction is not in question. It has slipped in every year in between. Say you want in. What is the number on the door? The trade has a name for the price of the permission itself. Blue sky. It is the money that changes hands over and above the land, the building, the tools, and the stock. The price of the right to have that manufacturer's name on your sign. Blue sky is quoted as a multiple of what a store earns before tax. In the second quarter of 2025, the publicly traded dealer groups were paying a blended 6.2 times. Across the first half of 2025, the average store inside those groups earned $2.17 million before tax, up from the $1.92 million it earned a year earlier. 6.2 times $2.17 million, about $13.45 million in 2025 for the right to keep the doors open. Now, that multiple comes from an advisory firm that earns its fees arranging these sales in a market where most prices are never published. Treat it as the trade's own estimate, because that is what it is. But AutoNation's audited books land close to it. $1.0 billion of franchise rights, spread across 76 stores in 2025, works out near $13.2 million a store. The other stores in the group carry no franchise right on the balance sheet at all, because nobody ever bought those franchises separately. The multiple is not a fixed thing either. It moves with what buyers think the earnings will do next. And by the middle of 2025, average store values were sitting around 3/4 above where they had been before the pandemic. You would be buying near the top of a long climb, which is a sentence every buyer in every trade has said to themselves at least once. Now add up what that $13.5 million does not include. The land, the building, the lifts in the shop, the alignment rack, the paint booth if you keep one, the tire machine, the computers, the phone system, the software the manufacturer requires you to run, the parts on the shelves, the loaner fleet for customers whose repairs run long. Not one car on the front lot. Those come later, and they come borrowed. You are somewhere north of $13 million before a single customer has walked through the glass. How often a store at a price like that actually changes hands is something the trade counts once a quarter. Now the money that goes out whether anybody buys anything or not. Start with the cars because you do not own them. Almost every new vehicle on an American forecourt is sitting there on floor plan. A revolving loan secured on the car itself, drawn the day the vehicle comes off the truck, repaid within a few days of it going out of the gate. The lender is usually the manufacturer's own finance arm, which is a tidy arrangement if you happen to be the manufacturer. You get paid for building the car whether or not anybody wants it, and you charge the dealer rent on it while it waits. Rent is the right word. At the end of 2025, AutoNation's new vehicle floor plan carried a weighted average rate of 5.4% against $3.2 billion drawn on pledged stock. That is a rate on one particular day, not an average across the year, because floor plan rates move with the market, and the clock runs the whole time. Domestic brands were sitting on 47 days of supply at the end of 2025, imports on 41. Call it a month and a half of interest on every unit before it finds an owner. The same series shows imports down to 20 days in 2021, back when the factories had stopped and dealers were selling cars almost before they had finished paying to keep them. New vehicle floor plan interest ran to $181.1 million for 2025. Here is the part that changes the arithmetic. The manufacturers pay most of it back. Floor plan assistance, money handed over specifically to support the dealer's cost of holding their cars, came to $134.8 million for AutoNation in 2025. Net cost of carrying a year of unsold stock, $46.3 million. And that assistance is credited into new vehicle gross profit at the moment the car sells, which means it is already sitting inside the per-car figure the company reports. The help is real. It is just not extra. Payroll does not come back at all. The average dealership ran $5.61 million of payroll in 2025, across 65 people earning $1,619 a week on the federal labor statistics basis. Those wage figures come out of a different methodology than the payroll table, so the two will not reconcile to the cent, and the association says so itself. 65 people is not an abstraction. It is a sales floor, a finance desk, a parts counter, a service drive with advisors standing at it, a wash bay, a switchboard, and a controller in a back office reconciling every one of those departments at the end of every month. Then, advertising, which is the line every new owner thinks is optional. It is not. The average store spent $586,246 on it in 2025. Of that, in 2025, $123,698 went to search engine marketing and $117,249 to third-party listing sites. Television took $61,556, and the newspapers took $12,311 in 2025. You are paying twice as much to sit above a rival on a results page as you are to appear on television, and the rival is 3 exits down the same road. None of these lines waits for a customer. The interest accrues on a Sunday. The payroll runs whether the lot is busy or empty. The listing sites bill you monthly for the privilege of being findable. The obvious answer to a thin margin is volume. Sell more of them. Spread the fixed costs across more units. Every trade believes this, and in most trades it works. Here is the part that catches almost every new owner. It does not work here. AutoNation moved more new vehicles in 2025 than it had in 2023, and new vehicle gross profit per car still fell from $4,342 to $2,564, down again from the $3,045 it made per car in 2024. Be careful with that 2023 number, because it is not a baseline. That was the tale of the inventory shortage, when there was nothing on the ground and no reason on earth to discount anything. But 3 years point one way. Volume does not rescue you, because every extra car brings its own costs in with it, its own floor plan interest for as long as it stands there, its own commission the day it leaves, its own slice of the search spend that walked the buyer through the door, and it arrives carrying a gross profit of 4.9% of what it sells for, before 1 hour of the store's own selling or occupancy cost has come off it. 4.9%. On the largest single purchase most households will ever finance. There is one department in that building that does not work this way, and it sits behind the showroom, where customers only go when something is wrong. Think of it as a dentist's practice with a car park attached, booked appointments, hourly labor at a posted rate, parts sold alongside the labor on the same ticket, and a customer who cannot easily take the work elsewhere because the warranty, the recall, the software update, and the diagnostic tool that talks to the car all live under one roof. The average American dealership took $9,687,942 in service and parts sales in 2025, a figure that carries body shop work at the roughly 1 store in 3 that runs one, that came across 16,252 repair orders. At $494 of sales per customer repair order, on a posted mechanical labor rate of $186 an hour, worked by 16 technicians before you count the advisor standing at the drive or the staff behind the parts counter. 16,252 tickets. That is about 45 a day, every day of the year, on cars the store may never have sold in the first place. Nobody arrives at a service drive because they saw a flag. They arrive because a light came on, or because the sticker on the windscreen says the interval is up, or because the manufacturer wrote to them about a recall. There is no discounting conversation. There is no rival at the next junction offering the same repair $400 cheaper because the customer never rings round for a transmission diagnosis the way they ring round for a price on a truck. Warranty work comes in on top of that, paid by the manufacturer at a rate negotiated separately from the one on the board, which is a running argument in every franchise store in the country, and has been for decades. And then the whole building hands what it earned to the same place. Selling, general and administrative costs took 67.9% of AutoNation's gross profit in 2025. Wages, rent, light, insurance, the software, the coffee. $2.03, gone before interest, before tax, before anybody's distribution. Now the arithmetic. One car, one currency, one filing. Start on the customer's side of the desk, because that is where the money enters the building. In the fourth quarter of 2025, the average new vehicle loan financed $43,582 over a term of 68.9 months at 6.3%. That comes to $767 a month. Nearly 6 years of payments on something that will be worth a fraction of the balance by the time the last one clears. Look at what that term is doing. 68.9 months is not an accident of the market. It is the number that drops the monthly figure to where the customer said they could live. Stretch the term far enough and almost any car becomes affordable on the only number most buyers genuinely negotiate, which is the payment and not the price. Now the store's side. AutoNation retailed 528,822 vehicles in 2025, made up of 259,264 new and 269,558 used. Divide the year by that number, and the business stops being abstract. New vehicles were 48.9% of the company's revenue in 2025, and $52,075 of revenue arrived with each one retailed. That is a richer mix than the national average, because better than a third of this company's revenue comes off luxury forecourts. Variable operations, meaning the metal and the finance desk taken together, produced $4,819 of gross profit per car in 2025. Of that, $2,769 came from finance and insurance in 2025. That is not one product. It is the arranging of the loan through a lender who pays for the introduction, plus the vehicle service contract, plus the other protection products sold alongside it, in 20 minutes at a desk with a door that closes, which leaves $2,050 per car in 2025 for both metal departments, new and used. Every salesperson on the floor, every hour spent on a trade-in valuation, every walk around in the rain, $2,050. The used side on its own carried $1,555 of gross profit per used unit sold in 2025. Then the back of the building. Parts and service produced $2,355.1 million of gross profit in 2025, on a 48.7% margin against its own revenue. Across 528,822 deliveries in 2025, that is $4,453 per car, though a good share of that work was done on cars this company never sold, which is exactly the point of owning a service drive. So in 2025, $4,819 from the front of the building, $4,453 from the back. Call it $9,272 a car. And with wholesale and the small remaining lines, the filing's own figure for 2025 is $9,358 per retail delivery. Now take it apart again. Apply that same 67.9% to the $9,358 a car in 2025. About $6,354 of it goes straight back out in 2025 on wages, rent, light, insurance, and software. Then floor plan interest. Then the other interest, the kind secured on buildings rather than on cars. Then a year's worth of write-downs against stores that had stopped performing well enough to be worth what the books said they were worth. What is left is the number held back since the beginning of this. AutoNation's income before income taxes for 2025 was $884.5 million. Across those same 528,822 units in 2025, that is $1,673 per car. $52,000 on the windscreen, $1,673 at the bottom of the page, before tax, and that figure carries the group's finance arm and its collision centers inside it. So a franchised store standing on its own does a little worse than that. June 2024. A company called CDK Global goes dark. CDK is not a name most people outside the trade would recognize, and that is the point. It is the software a large share of American dealerships run on. It writes the repair order. It prints the deal paperwork. It reports the sale back to the manufacturer so the vehicle can be registered, warranted, and paid for. Ransomware took it down, and for the better part of 2 weeks, stores that had cars on the lot and customers standing in front of them could not finish a transaction. Some went back to paper. Some wrote deals into notebooks and hoped the numbers would reconcile when the lights came back on. A store can sell a car with a handshake. It cannot register one, it cannot fund one, and it cannot bill a manufacturer for warranty work, because all three of those things are a message sent from a system that had stopped sending anything. Look at what that actually was. Nothing burned down. No customer changed their mind. Demand was exactly where it had been the week before. The buildings, the stock, the staff, and the franchise rights were all untouched, and the stores still could not trade. AutoNation put its own damage at roughly $2.17 per share of 2024 diluted earnings before any recovery. That is the company's own internal estimate of lost income plus one-time costs. And the filing calls it exactly that, an estimate, not a measured loss. Look at where those one-time costs went. The company paid about $43 million of extra compensation to commission-based staff in 2024. People who are paid when a deal closes. People who could not close a deal. People who would otherwise have walked across the road to a store running a different system and taken their customer list with them. Here is what the shutdown showed about the shape of this business. American dealerships wrote 276 million repair orders in 2025. A service drive that cannot open a ticket does not push that work to next week. It loses the hour. The technician stands in an empty bay at full wage in the one department where the labor is the product, and there is no way to sell Tuesday twice. And the money that eventually came back was not sales revenue at all. It was a claim. AutoNation booked $60.5 million of after-tax insurance recoveries for the outage in 2025. 2 years, one company, one table and one filing. Set 2023 against 2025, and keep in mind what 2023 was, because it flatters the comparison. That was the year the factories were still catching up and nobody on a forecourt had to discount anything to anybody. New vehicle gross profit per car. $4,342 in 2023, $2,564 in 2025. Across the department in dollars, $1,061.8 million in 2023, $664.8 million in 2025. Between 2023 and 2025, that is $397.0 million gone off a single line. And it went while the company was selling more cars, not fewer. 244,546 new retail units in 2023, 259,264 in 2025. More metal out of the gate, $400 million less to show for it. Think about what that does to a sales floor. The same handshakes, the same test drives, the same Saturdays, the same hours standing outside in whatever the weather is doing. More cars leaving than 2 years earlier, and a pay plan that used to make a good month now making an ordinary one. Nobody worked less. The margin simply left, and it left quietly, a few $100s at a time, deal after deal, over 24 months. New vehicles as a share of what the company earned before costs. 20.7% in 2023, 13.4% in 2025. Now the two departments that did not do that. Here is the part that decides whether a store survives a soft year. Finance and insurance, $2,736 per retail unit in 2023, $2,769 in 2025. It went up. Through the two hardest years the metal has had since the shortage ended, the finance office moved by $33 a car, and it moved in the right direction. Parts and service as a share of gross profit, 41.7% in 2023, 47.6% in 2025. The service lane did not suddenly become brilliant. It stood exactly where it had been standing while the thing in front of it fell over, and that is how a department ends up carrying almost half a company. Company gross profit, $5,131.5 million in 2023, $4,948.5 million in 2025. Down, yes, down by roughly 3.5% on a new car department that lost close to 2/5 of what it earned. Operating income as a share of gross profit, 32.2% in 2023, 25.1% in 2025. And be fair to that 2025 figure. It carries $159.0 million of write-downs against goodwill and franchise rights taken in 2025, which is a judgment about what particular stores will be worth in future, not a record of a bad fortnight's trading. So here is the ledger, in the only unit that matters to somebody standing in the building. The spread between 2023 and 2025 per car is $1,778 on the metal. On the paperwork, between 2023 and 2025, it is $33 a car. That is the swing you would be buying. Almost all of it sits in one department, and it is the one at the front, under the lights, that everybody thinks of first, which means two stores could walk into the same year and have opposite ones. A store that had lived off new car gross in 2023 arrived in 2025 with the same building, the same staff, the same franchise on the wall, and something like $1,800 a car less to pay for any of it. A store that had spent the previous decade filling its bays and staffing its finance desk arrived in the same year and barely felt it. Same market, same brand, in some cases the same road. Two entirely different years, decided by which half of the building the owner had been quietly investing in all along. Go back to the front of the lot, the flags, the glass, the rows of new metal angled at the road, washed this morning, priced to the dollar in the corner of the windscreen. That is the part of the business that costs the most to own, borrows the most to stand still, and earns the least when it is working exactly as intended. What a buyer pays for is not the cars. It is a permission a manufacturer cannot easily take back. It is a desk beside the showroom floor where a loan and a warranty get signed. And it is a lane of service bays at the back of the building that produced 47.6% of everything the company earned before costs on 17.5% of its revenue in 2025. The lot at the front is what fills the bays at the back. That is the trade. You sell metal at almost no margin in order to acquire a customer who will come back for years of oil, brakes, tires, software updates and warranty claims, and who will finance the next one across your desk when they do. Which is why people keep paying prices for these businesses that look absurd next to the new car margin. In the 12 months to June 2025, 454 dealerships changed hands in the United States. More than one a day in a country with 16,990 of them. And notice what that does to the small owner. A store bought at several times its earnings has to still be worth several times its earnings to whoever comes next, and the buyers who can wait longest for that to be true are the ones with the deepest balance sheets. That is not a conspiracy. It is just where the arithmetic settles when the earnings are steady and the price of the door is high. What almost all of those stores actually earned last year is still in no public document. The private ones do not file. The industry's own annual profile counts their repair orders, prints their labor rates, lists their payroll state by state, and stops one line short of the only figure an owner genuinely cares about. What survives is the filing of the company big enough that the law makes it publish. One company, 245 rooftops out of nearly 17,000. So the next time you drive past the flags, look past them. The showroom is the shop window. The money is in the bays behind it and in the small room off to one side. And both of those were built by somebody who worked out, a long time before you drove past, that the cars were never the point.